And more on this now with Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee. This really ratcheted up in intensity, Congressman, in the Wall Street Journal when it pronounced, quote, 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick enough in November of 2019 that they sought hospital care. We do know what they sought. We do not know what they sought hospital care for, but we do know that the Wuhan Institute was working with bat coronaviruses. Suspicious to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know the Trump administration in January had released the contours of this information, but this latest report kind of fills in some crucial details, the number of researchers, precisely when they got sick, and the fact that they were hospitalized. So why is this significant? Well, this cluster of people could be our patient zero, right? And we want to know the patient zero in order to get to the bottom of how this started, so as to prevent another pandemic like this. We know for a fact that the Chinese Communist Party has been deliberately covering up a transparent and thorough investigation from the start. We know the WHO has been corrupted by the Chinese Communist Party, and even the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, looked at the initial report that got released in March and said, actually, we need to investigate the lab leak. And then most remarkably, we have people like Dr. Fauci, who for a year has been throwing cold water on the lab leak hypothesis, and his cronies that were really denigrating anyone who was suggesting that we should investigate the lab leak hypothesis, now starting to say, well, actually, it may be more than a remarkable coincidence that China's only level 4 biosafety lab happens to be in the very place where this entire pandemic started. So the dam is starting to break in the scientific community, but we still have a ton of unanswered questions. And our government is not being forthcoming. The Biden administration is not being forthcoming. They need to declassify all the related intelligence because we need to get to the bottom of it.
You know, Congressman, we had in recent days the head of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky, say in a congressional hearing that she was leaving it open to possibility that this came out of a lab. But I think it bears repeating and playing again what Dr. Fauci said. This went unnoticed back on May the 11th. But now that it's come out, I think this really changes the whole tone of this idea of where the coronavirus originated from. So let's listen again to Dr. Fauci.
Are you still confident that it developed naturally?
I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China until we find out, to the best of our ability, exactly what happened.
As you pointed out, a year ago, Fauci was rejecting both the idea that it was human engineered and that it came out of a laboratory. Now he's saying maybe we need to investigate this.
Well, it's absolutely remarkable. Listen, I'm glad he's finally coming around to it. But the fact is, Dr. Fauci is still lying about the fact that U.S. taxpayer dollars granted by his organization, NIAID, went to something called the EcoHealth Alliance, run by Dr. Peter Daszak, which funded dangerous gain-of-function research, making naturally occurring coronaviruses more pathogenic, more infectious at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We need to follow the money to understand whether our taxpayer dollars were funding the very research that may have started this entire thing. And in an exchange with Senator Paul a couple weeks ago, Dr. Fauci at best hid behind a highly narrow and legalistic definition of gain-of-function research. I believe he's not being fully forthcoming. In my own open source analysis in the matter of a week, I found multiple funding streams from the U.S. federal government, including DOD, through DARPA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, that were going through third parties like the EcoHealth Alliance to fund this type of research. And oh, by the way, the only American that was allowed on the WHO investigative team was none other than Dr. Peter Daszak, the head of the EcoHealth Alliance. The one human being in the world who had the biggest conflict of interest was allowed to investigate the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is critical to his professional reputation and success. So this whole thing stinks. We need a new, transparent, independent investigation, and the Biden administration leaving it up to the WHO is unacceptable. Jen Psaki today said that they couldn't confirm the latest Wall Street Journal report. That's a lie. That's not true. We can confirm it. We need to get to the bottom of it.
We should point out that Dr. Fauci in congressional hearings unequivocally said that the NIAID did not fund gain-of-function research at Wuhan, but he did not deny that the NIH was funding gain-of-function research here in the United States. Just want to, we've got to go, but I just want to put these up on the screen because this is the way most of the mainstream media was handling these reports a year ago. The New York Times, Senator Tom Cotton repeats fringe theory of coronavirus origins that it came from a lab. USA Today, Trump says U.S. investigating whether coronavirus spread after China lab mishap, but cites no evidence. The Washington Post, new research explores how conservative media misinformation may have intensified the severity of the pandemic. Give me 10 seconds on your response to this.
It's crazy. They're relying on this, I guarantee you, relying on the same scientific sources, such as Daszak and the other scientists who wrote this letter last year, that have produced all the misinformation the WHO has relied upon. It's a gigantic echo chamber, what we in the military would call a self-licking ice cream cone of disinformation that needs to be unpacked.
Yeah, well, it was a self-licking ice cream cone that has now apparently gained a lot of flavor and favor with a lot of people, other than the ones that we're talking about a year ago. Congressman Mike Gallagher, good to talk to you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, Jillian.
Well, Secretary of State